Hello, everyone. I am Juanita, and I am so excited for us to go live this evening for week one of our new campaign, the Don't Blow It, Flip Your Refund Challenge. We're just going to wait for a couple of more people to come in, and then we'll get started. All right, everyone. So we are going to get started. Thank you for all the group members who signed up this week to join us for our new challenge, the Don't Blow It, Flip Your Refund Challenge. So let's just talk about what we're going to do next 6 weeks. So basically, the reason why I came up with this challenge is because, as some of you know, and some of you might not know, but I am the owner of JIT Tax and Accounting Firm. And at our firm, we basically deal with a lot of small business clients, personal, individual, and business taxes, as well as accounting, as well as other financial products, document preparation, things like that. And a lot of times when I'm meeting with my clients, one of the things that always comes up is that they want to be able to do things, they want to be able to build assets, but they usually don't have the funds. So a lot of times, of course, for me, I get to see how many tax refunds come through my office. And of course, we, have hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially over the years that we see that are giving out to our clients every year. And it dawned on me, and I said, wow, we need to really be having this conversation to talk to people about what they're doing with their tax refunds. And I just seen a need for us to address the issue around financial literacy and what we are doing with our tax refunds, because you have money, and a lot of times people are not necessarily spending the money wisely. And it's usually the one time of year that a lump sum is given to you, unless it's for a different cause. Most of the time, most people are not seeing a lump sum of money like that until that time of the year. So then that brought me to the issue of saying, well, why don't we do a challenge, basically, getting people to use their tax refunds to build assets. So that's what we'll be talking about over the next 6 weeks, is how you're going to be able to use your tax refunds to build assets. And today, our first week topic is going to be around money mindset. So I'm really excited about being able to talk about money mindset, because I have a very interesting take on money mindset, on why it's hard for people to spend money wisely. And of course, a lot of it is due to a lot of lack thereof of financial literacy. So let's just get right into that. If you guys are joining us, you're welcome to throw questions out there or anything like that, because I would love to hear your feedback and also answer questions on how you feel about some of the things that we'll be talking about. So the first thing that I want to bring up is the fact that I put a post out today talking about, if you had $1 million, what would you do with it? And a lot of times my clients know that I'm always stressing the fact that it's not necessarily how much you make, but it's how much you keep. And what do I mean by that? Well, the value of the money you have is really in what that money ends up turning into. So you could have a person who has $1 million but does not have any assets, does not have net worth. And that's the one thing I got. So when someone tells me, oh, I made $1 million, oh, I, make this much, then my first question to them is always, well, what's your net worth? What kind of assets do you have? A lot of different clients come through our office. So the interesting thing is that we get to see, clients' assets and things like that, how much they make all the time. And you'd be surprised that a lot of times there are people who even make under $100,000 who have more assets, more cash flow, and more, money mindset or financial literacy around how they use their money than those of us or some of the clients that actually make six figures or more, multiple six figures, or even $1 million. One of the things that is also important when I'm talking to clients is this idea about building generational wealth. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what is the issue? Like, if you have $1 million, why don't you know what to do with it, right? Like, obviously, we would want to think that we're not going to blow it. But it's not about the issue of not blowing it, because of course we would all love to have $1 million and we would all love to know what to do with it. One of the things is that at least in our community, is that we have a lack of financial literacy. And our lack of financial literacy comes from, three different areas. One is our past, which is our generational curses around how we learned about money, how we perceive money, and how handling money was taught to us. The next one is what happens with us in the present. What are we presently learning about money? What are we educating ourselves on? What are we currently spending our money on? And then the third thing is our lack of planning. What are our goals for future spending? What do we want to do with our money? What is the end game? How do we want to show up in the world when we leave this world? What kind of assets do we want to have and give on? We have a lot of people talking about generational wealth, but in a sense, we're not necessarily doing the things that we need to do in order to leave our next generation with wealth. So one of the things that I want to talk about first is this idea of the past. So what does the past have to do with what we do in the current space that we're in our spending? Well, a couple years ago, I came across this quote, or this idea called the black tax. And I know you're like, what's the black tax? So it actually has nothing to do with like physical tax that's paid. What it's talking about is this idea that we are already born into a deficit when it comes to money. So if you're from a marginalized community like I am, then we won't talk about who did it, but there were obviously some things that did not allow our generation, or even today, our generation, to be at the same level as, say, other communities that were not marginalized. So because of that, we basically are born into a deficit. We don't come into the world with assets. We don't come into the world with cash flow. So therefore, we already start off with this idea that we have to kind of pull ourselves up. And I don't say that to use it as an excuse. I say that because when you are thinking about the decisions you're making now, you have to consider that. You have to consider, what you make and the decisions you make on money, how that was affected by the deficit that you've already carried just being a part of the community you're in. And that's what's going to help us to push ourselves to want to use money more wisely. The second thing is our present. So when we think about our present, we think about how much we make to afford to pay for our children, our regular household, things like that. So there's all this mindset, right, around how much we make And somehow, somewhere in there was this conversation that someone had. I know I heard it when I was little, but it was around, making too much money. You know what I mean? Like if you make too much money, it's a bad thing. If you have too much money, you're not humble. And I think that what's happening in present day is that still kind of lingers. Like even though we hear a lot about wanting to make more money, that this idea behind making too much money is sort of a bad thing. I wouldn't say that that's true or not true, because like I said, sometimes people that make more money actually have uh, worse spending habits than those who don't. The issue is that what we consider as more money in today's society is not what's realistic to the living means of even just basic living. For instance, I come from the city of Boston, and the cost of living is really high there. And just for you to be able to survive, meaning like basic necessities, like the need of basic housing, food, and water. If you are a single person, then you need to be making at least $90,000 a year just for basic necessities. So if that's the case, then 90% of us living in the city of Boston, because we're not even including families, basically need to be making over $90,000 a year just to live comfortably, just to live in basic needs. So that means you have to wrap your head around what too much money is. So imagine if that's the basic level before you're in poverty, then your idea of what too much money is needs to be twice as much as that. 3 times if you're trying to think about even what I'm going to move to, which is building generational wealth and doing things that will affect your future, because those things also cost money, and we don't factor that in. Sometimes we're only considering the now. We're considering how we spend now. So we'll jump right into that. So when you talk about future and you talk about how you're spending your money today, which affects your future, you have to have a goal in mind. What is your goal? Are you trying to retire early? Is retirement not important? Are you trying to provide generational wealth, meaning that, the children that you leave or your family members, younger family? When I think about what I want to provide in generational wealth, I always think about my nieces and nephews. So I think about my children and their children, but I also think about the broader, my expanded family and what I do now and how it can affect them later. Am I not putting them in a deficit? Because one of my goals is to not have them. We talked about that deficit earlier, that black tax. Well, I don't want my nieces and nephews to be continuously trying to pull themselves out of a deficit. So if I can create generational wealth for my family, then I will already be helping to set that standard that our family is not being defined by the black tax. So if I have to think about that, then now I have to think about how I spend today and how that affects my plan for later. And a lot of us, when we think about financial literacy, we're not doing that. Like, we're not trying to focus on the past, the present, and the future. And that's why a lot of times, if we were to have money, if we were to have $1 million, we don't really know how to spend it because we don't have that plan. We don't have the financial education behind us. We don't have the plan. And that's why we have to really dig into what is causing us to not have that financial literacy. And a lot of it is mindset. You have to start thinking about money differently. And one of the other things that, you have to touch on is, how did you learn? Like, where did you learn, or how did you learn your first ideas about money and spending? Well, I'll share some personal stories about my journey with money, some good, some bad. And, I grew up in Boston, like I mentioned earlier, and we lived in buildings. And I always used to say about my mom, like, you know what, she can make $1 out of 15 cents. I knew that we didn't have much money, but I would never have known it because we just never seemed like the rest of the families around us, where they struggled a lot more when it even came to like food, for instance. We always, was eating, full meals, things like that. We used to have parties, and to this day, I will tell you, even for me, again, something I learned, we would have parties, and man, you know what I mean? We would have all the good food. One thing we could do is throw a party and serve some good food because that was important. And while other families, they didn't have the ability to do that. Another way that I learned that my mother must have been good with money is that, I don't know if y'all had this, but we used to have a management company, and if you was late on your rent, if were getting evicted, they would slap this big yellow piece of paper on your door so that anybody who came up to your door would see the yellow piece of paper, or you would just see them barging in the building just to place that paper on your door. And I would always see neighbors, I would always see other people with, these yellow papers on their door. And we just never got that yellow paper. Like, we just never got it. And I just remember thinking, my mother never sat me down and she never talked to me about money. She never told me how much she made at the time. But just as I got older and watching that, like, that was my idea, that my mother must have handled her money well, was because how we lived compared to how others around us, lived. And that was the first time I kind of think I learned about. Next time I remember learning about money was when I was in high school. There was this guest that came out to our high school, and he basically talked to us about credit. And the first thing he said when he got up there was, do not open credit cards. Don't open credit cards. Don't open, store cards. You're going to ruin your credit. Never, get things in your name. Don't allow people to use your name. I mean, he just went in on the first thing. He was like, abstinence. He was like, until you absolutely have to, I think he said something like, till you graduate college, like, don't get into debt. And I remember that I listened to him. Like, I was one of those people that when I graduated, he's like, when you turn 18, they're just gonna flood you, with a whole bunch of cards. Sign up for this, sign up for that. Make sure you don't sign up for anything. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to make sure that I never, ever get a credit card. And he kind of scared me around like the pitfalls of credit. And of course, as I learned now, that was the opposite of what I should have learned, because what he should have taught me was how to handle the debt of the credit card, the importance of actually opening cards when you're younger so that you can build a history of credit, and not to scare me into not opening cards, but to actually educate me on how to leverage debt and how to not allow myself to misuse debt, right? And that was a great opportunity there to actually school me on the system. And of course, today, I'm getting schooled on the system. We're all getting schooled on the system. If you're on Instagram, you are getting schooled on credit and debt, okay? And of course, for me, I don't think you should take advice sometimes from Instagram. Let me not say that. I have plenty of clients who call me and they, ask me about things that they hear on Instagram. So what I would say is that it's a great place for us to get information. We haven't been able to have the level of information at our fingertips like this that we've had ever in life. So I do think in terms it's a great thing. What I would say is make sure you have a person, maybe like JIT or someone else that you see that can handle money very well, that can basically coach you into whether or not the things that you're hearing on Instagram one, are true, because there are a lot of people putting misinformation out there. And then secondly, if it really applies to you and what's best. So that's what I was going to talk about. We talked a little bit about the past, and how we learned about money. I did want to bring one thing back up about my past, is that even though I learned some great things in my ideas with my mom as well, there was some things that I could have learned better. Again, like I said, when you have children, you want to be open and you want to talk to them about money. You want to talk to them about budget. It would have been much more beneficial had my mother even said to me, hey, listen, we only make, $30,000 a year. We can only spend this. I am very diligent about, when my kids and we go to the grocery store, I'm like, hey, we got a budget. This is all we can spend. This is it. And I remember, when my budget was tight, and my daughter, one day, because I was like, usually I let them get something, and I'm like, you got to find something under $5, or, you can only get this versus that. And this day I was just like, y'all can't get nothing. Like, we are getting the essentials and that's it. And I remember my daughter saying to me, well, mommy, are we poor? And I was telling her, I was very honest with her. I was like, we're not poor, but we are broke. Like, at the moment, mommy doesn't have the money that she usually has. So what this means is that we have to be on a tight budget. And I'm very open with my kids about money, where I earn my money, things like that. So those are the things that I feel like I should have learned from my mom, that could have helped me bridge the gap on how I think about money, how I feel about money, and some of the past generational curses that occur, but also some of the present day things that I also try to do with my children. Also, remember I told you we used to have all these parties and spend a lot of money on food. Literally, I'm still working on that issue today. We spend a lot of money on food. We love to throw parties. So in a sense, that is something that I learned that was great for my family. But in a sense, when you are on a budget, those are the things you should be also thinking about, when there might be other things like we'll talk about later on. I have my cousin on here, and she said that's the core way. I mean, food is always at the top of our parties. But like I said, when you are on a path and you have a purpose with your money and a spending plan, then some of those things, some of those generational, I think Trapper, I was watching him the other day, and he called it financial traumas. So some of those financial traumas that we bring into our adulthood, we have to embrace them and remember them. It's very nostalgic, but we have to start thinking about our spending and how we have basically taken on those good and bad ways of spending money. So part of the challenge for today is that I would challenge everyone to go home and think about those two things. Think about the black tax, is what I said, which is our generational deficit. That's more into like, if you think, in terms of us being marginalized and how, we don't come into the world with assets. And then also, what was your upbringing? What kind of money lessons did you learn when you grew up? Who taught you your first idea about money? How old was you when you first thought about how, what you should do with your money and how you should function? And then the next thing that you should talk about is, what are your goals for money? Like, what kind of goals do you have moving forward? And how does that look when you think about the things that you need to be doing, whether it is increasing your job, whether it is figuring out why, if you make I'm just throwing it out there, why if you make $1 million and the guy next door to you only makes 100, and his net worth is, just looking better than yours. Everybody wants to talk about that bag, but it's really not the bag that's important. You know what I mean? Like, it's really about the net worth. It's about what are you going to leave when you leave this earth? Like, what's left? What do you have now? If you want to, retire, you know what I mean? Like net worth is important, in retirement. And over the next 6 weeks, so we are going to be discussing these things more in detail over the next 6 weeks. So that's why we have this challenge. Next week, we're going to be talking about what are assets. Like I keep talking about net worth, assets. So we are going to be, breaking that down and talking about, all these terms. And if anybody on here is in business and you don't know the terms I'm using, net worth, assets, generational wealth, things like that, financial independence, then you definitely need to tune in to next week, because people that don't have businesses just definitely need to know about that. But people who do have businesses, there's no way you're going to survive in business if you're not financially literate in those areas. So tune in every week. We're going to be here at 6:00, and we are going to be discussing different topics around not blowing your money. And one of the topics that we're going to be using to kind of just flow through how not to blow your money is by using your tax refunds. So what we ask is that if you got a tax refund, do not spend it. Go through this 6 weeks with us. Let's dive deep into some of the things like we talked about today, which is money mindset. Because when we start talking about what we're going to do with our refund, that's why you need to start thinking about how do you view your money? What are these things? What is the mindset you have behind money? Do you know what is your comfortable number that is just for you personally to live with? And that doesn't even start including children, family members, things like that. So remember that number is 90K in Boston. So you ain't even nowhere near 90K. Unfortunately, you're considered, in poverty, because you wouldn't be able to have the basic needs without. And let me just say that, because some people might say, well, I live very comfortable and I don't make 90,000. It's because you have some type of assistance. So in Boston, a lot of people don't make 90,000, but the rest of that 90,000, you might make 50, you might make 60, but it's being subsidized somehow. So you might have subsidized housing, you might receive food stamps, you might have other people who are helping you to live. And this is what I mean. This is the money mindset. You need to understand that. You need to understand that if you're receiving assistance, then that's what's bridging the gap. It's not because you're not in poverty. It's because you're receiving assistance that helps with the lapse in you not being able to afford, per se, to take care of your basic needs. And for those of you who are making over that, or are making triple six figures, things like that, and you're struggling with the basic necessities, if you don't have assets, then you want to tune in, because you need to start figuring out why you are not pushing yourself to the point where you're not in poverty. You could be in middle class, you could be a high earner. Why don't I have assets? What am I doing with my money? What's causing me not to spend wisely? Why am I not meeting my goals? So over the next 5 weeks, you are going to come out of this with the idea of the why, and hopefully everyone will come out of this with a new asset. So we're hoping that the outcome is that you'll have a new asset, and you'll be using that asset towards one of your financial goals, which is, if it's to build an additional stream of income, which is to create something for generational wealth. It could be any of those things. So I'm excited about, the next couple of weeks. And, we have a Facebook group. So anyone who wants to join a Facebook group for exclusive content, I would love for you to go on it. It's the group is called Don't Blow It, Flip My Refund. If you go on the JIT Tax page, you will see the link for the group there. Sign up. On Monday, we'll be doing exclusive Q&A with me and anyone who's on the group, where you'll be able to ask questions about today. Maybe you have a personal issue that you want to talk about. And, You know what I mean? Like you'll be able to go into the group and you'll be able to share within the group so that we have a smaller group setting that we could get your questions answered. Toss me any questions, topics that you want to talk about, and then I'll also be able to try to include that in the next week, either the group or our upcoming lives. So just remember to tune in next week at 6 o'clock. We will be talking about next week, what is an asset? And we'll talk about other terms. Like I said, we'll be talking about what financial independence is, generational wealth, net worth, all of these things that will help you understand a little bit more about how to keep your money. So just remember, that's always the bottom line, not to blow it, but to be able to keep your money and turn it into assets that will then in turn give you value to your net worth. All right. So thank you everybody for joining, and I will see you guys next week. Same time, same place. Those in the group, don't forget to send your questions. Peace.